The adult card game was suggested as a joke. But after my neighbor responded, I wouldn't say so, to my wife's phrase that she doesn't like this position in sex, it turned into something more. I don't know why I agreed to it. Maybe it was a whine. Maybe it was my wife's teasing smile. Or maybe it was the way our neighbor leaned on the back of our sofa, eyes sparkling with the kind of mischief that dares you to say no. One thing I do know, that night began like a harmless game, and it ended with a line I can't get out of my head. The deck of cards looked innocent enough when my wife set it down. A glossy black box, silver lettering across the lid. Intimate poses, a lover's card game. She bought it online. She said, half as a joke. I remember laughing, pretending I wasn't curious. But when she suggested we try out after dinner, I hesitated until Mark, our neighbor, chuckled and said, why not? Could be fun. That's how the three of us ended up sitting around our coffee table, candles flickering low, glasses of red wine sweating faintly against the wood. The room smelled of the lasagna my wife had baked earlier, still hanging in the air like warmth you couldn't shake off. The mood was casual, almost domestic, but the cards promised something else. All right, my wife said, shuffling with exaggerated drama. Rules are simple. We draw a card, we read it, we laugh, and then we drink. Nobody has to try anything. It's just for fun. Mark smirked, leaning forward on his elbows. Just for fun. Got it. His grin was the first thing that made me uneasy. There was something in it, too sharp, too knowing, but I told myself I was being paranoid. Mark had been our neighbor for years. He was the kind of man people trusted without thinking. Broad-shouldered, easy laugh, always quick to lend a hand with groceries or a stubborn lawnmower. A friend. That's all. The first card was tame. Something about the missionary position, illustrated with a cartoon couple. We laughed. My wife rolled her eyes. Mark raised his glass and toasted the tradition. Easy. But as the cards cycled, the illustrations grew more elaborate. Acrobatics. Twists. Things that looked like they required a yoga instructor and a chiropractor waiting on standby. Then my wife drew that card. Her face shifted the instant she looked at it. Half laugh, half nervous wrinkle of her nose. Oh, God, she said, fanning herself with the card like it was too hot to hold. I don't like this pose. I leaned to see it. The drawing showed a tangled knot of limbs, something halfway between a passionate embrace and a wrestling move. I chuckled. Yeah, that looks like a pulled muscle waiting to happen. But before I could say more, Mark leaned back in his chair, wine glass balanced loosely in his hand. He looked at my wife, only at her, and grinned. I wouldn't say that. The words hung there longer than they should have. His tone wasn't teasing. Not really. It was too calm, too assured, like he wasn't imagining the cartoon figures at all, but something else, something real. My wife laughed nervously, waving the card as if to brush his comment away. You're ridiculous. Nobody could actually pull this off. Some people could, Mark replied, still smiling. It's not about the pose. It's about knowing what fits. And then he drank, as if the conversation had ended. But it hadn't ended for me. Not at all. The rest of the game blurred by. I laughed at cards I didn't find funny, drank more than I meant to, and kept watching my wife's cheeks, how they stayed just a little flushed, how she avoided Mark's eyes, but never quite shut him down. The tension was like static in the room, invisible, but I could feel it on my skin. When the last card was drawn, my wife clapped her hands together and declared the game over. We'd finished a bottle of wine. The candles had melted low, and for a moment, it almost felt normal again. She hugged Mark at the door, a quick, casual gesture, and thanked him for joining us. He grinned as always, wished us good night, and disappeared into the warm summer darkness. But when I went to bed that night, his words echoed in my head. I wouldn't say that. Not looks fun. Not I'd try it. No, he'd said it like a secret, like he knew. And here's the thing that unsettled me most. When I turned to my wife, lie in the dim light beside me, I couldn't stop myself from wondering if maybe he did. That night, I dreamed of the card again. The twisted limbs, the impossible angle, my wife's flushed cheeks. Only in the dream, she wasn't laughing. She was trying, and when she gasped, it wasn't from discomfort. It was from pleasure. I woke up sweating, staring at the ceiling, with one thought burning in my mind. I needed to know what Mark meant, because if there was something he knew about my wife, something she hadn't told me, then this wasn't just a game anymore. It was the beginning of something else, something dangerous. The morning after that game night, I woke with a faint taste of wine still on my tongue and the residue of uneasy dreams in my head. My wife was already up, moving quietly in the kitchen, humming as though nothing at all had happened. For her, maybe it hadn't. But for me, Mark's words hadn't left. I wouldn't say that. For syllables that felt like the opening move in a game I hadn't realized we were playing. When I walked into the kitchen, she was pouring coffee, hair loose around her shoulders, robe cinched loosely at her waist. She looked tired but content, like the evening before had been nothing more than laughter and wine. I kissed her cheek, more out of habit than anything else, and asked, "Sleep well?" She smiled faintly. "Better than you, apparently. You tossed all night." I hesitated, then decided to test the waters. I kept thinking about what Mark said. Her brow furrowed slightly. "About what?" "That card. You said you didn't like the pose." He looked right at you and said, "I wouldn't say that." She blinked at me, then let out a short laugh. "You're really hung up on that?" It was a joke. He says things like that all the time. "Not like that." I muttered. Her smile faded, replaced by the sharp edge of defensiveness. "So what? Now he's not allowed to joke? He's our friend." I wanted to argue, but I swallowed it. Instead, I drank my coffee in silence, the bitterness coating my tongue thicker than usual. All day at work, I couldn't shake it. The way Mark had leaned back, calm, confident, like he wasn't even trying to be funny. The way my wife's cheeks had flushed. I told myself I was being paranoid, insecure, overprotective. And maybe I was. But when something gnaws at you long enough, paranoia feels a lot like instinct. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I spotted Mark outside watering his front lawn, shirt clinging to his back, easy grin as he waved at me. For a second, I considered walking over, saying something casual, try and gauge if he'd meant anything at all. But then, he called out first. "Good night last night, huh?" he said, voice carrying easily across the hedge. I forced a smile. "Yeah, interesting game." He tilted his head, as if to savor my choice of words. "Interesting, sure. Harmless fun. Unless," he let the sentence trail off, grinning in that same way he had at the table. Then he bent back to his hose, leaving me burning with the sense he'd planted another seed. At dinner, I told my wife about it. He made a comment, said it was harmless fun, unless... And then he just grinned at me. She sighed, spearing her fork into her pasta. "You're reading into everything. That's just the way he is. He pushes people's buttons. And you don't think that's disrespectful?" I asked. She shrugged. "Maybe a little. But you're letting him get in your head. That's exactly what he wants." I didn't argue further, but her words sat wrong with me. She wasn't denying it, wasn't offended. She was rationalizing him, defending him, even, and that, more than anything, made me feel the ground under us shift. Later that night, after she fell asleep, I lay awake listening to her breathing. I thought about the card game, the wine, the flushed look on her face. And then I imagined her pulling another card. Not with me this time, but with him. Hearing her laugh nervously again, except maybe she wouldn't wave it off. Maybe she'd lean in. Maybe she'd whisper back something she'd never dare say in front of me. I hated the image. I hated it so much I couldn't stop playing it in my head. And then came the strangest part. Mixed into the anger, there was a flicker of arousal. The thought of her being seen, being desired by someone else, stirred something primal and confusing in me. I turned over, shut my eyes tight, but my body betrayed me. I wanted her. But when I reached for her, she shifted in her sleep and pulled the blanket higher. I lay there awake, pulse racing, realizing two things at once. I no longer trusted Mark. I wasn't entirely sure I trusted her either. The next day, I tried to bury it. Work, errands, anything to keep my mind occupied. But in the evening when I came home, I found them on the porch together. My wife was laughing at something, head tilted back, eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen in a while. Mark leaned on the railing, relaxed, watching her as if she were the only person in the world. When they noticed me, my wife smiled, but there was a split second, so brief I almost doubted it, where her smile faltered like she'd been caught. "Hey," she said, voice light. "Mark just stopped by to ask about the lasagna recipe." Mark grinned. "Best I've had in years." Thought I'd steal the secret. I nodded, tight-lipped, and stood there with a sense that something invisible had already shifted between the three of us. That card game hadn't ended when we put the deck away. It was still being played, just with different rules. And the worst part? I wasn't sure if I was already losing. I told myself I wouldn't obsess, that I'd stop watching every glance, every smile, every word exchange between my wife and Mark. But Telling yourself to stop is one thing. Convincing your gut is another. The next few days passed quietly enough. Work, dinners, evenings on the couch. Yet each time I heard the faint sound of conversation drifting from the porch, or saw Mark's silhouette moving along the hedge, my pulse quickened. I began cataloging everything. Her tone, her body language, the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she spoke to him. Innocent gestures, perhaps, or signals. I couldn't tell anymore. One evening I came home later than usual. The air was thick with the smell of cut grass, the sun low and golden. As I walked up the path, I spotted them again. My wife was sitting on the porch steps, a glass of wine in hand, her bare legs stretched out. Mark leaned casually against the railing, holding a beer. They were close enough to talk quietly, but I could hear her laughter float out across the yard. When she noticed me, she startled, just slightly. "Oh, hey," she said, lifting her glass. "We were just talking." "About what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. Mark answered before she could. "About last weekend. That game. Can't believe you still have those cards lying around." He grinned, raising his beer. "Some of them memorable." My wife laughed nervously, swatting at the air as if to push his words away. "Don't start." But he kept going, eyes locked on her. It's funny, though. Everyone thinks they know what they like. But sometimes it takes the right context. The words made my skin crawl. He wasn't saying anything explicit, but the implication was sharp as a knife. I forced a smile and went inside, leaving them both on the porch. Later that night, I brought it up while we were getting ready for bed. "Why do you let him talk to you like that?" She frowned at me in the mirror as she removed her earrings. "Like what?" "Like he knows you. Like he's hinting at something only the two of you understand." She sighed, shaking her head. "You're hearing things. He's just teasing. You make it sound like we have some kind of secret." "Do you?" I asked, sharper than I intended. Her eyes flashed as she turned to me. "Of course not. God, you're letting your imagination run wild. It was a stupid card game, that's all." But even as she said it, I saw the way her cheeks colored, the way her robe slipped slightly at the shoulder before she pulled it tighter. She wasn't guilty, at least not yet, but she wasn't entirely innocent either. And that space between the two gnawed at me worse than either extreme. The next evening, Mark came by again. He knocked this time, holding a stack of mail he mistakenly received. I thanked him, ready to shut the door, but he lingered, eyes flicking past me toward the living room where my wife sat with her book. "Mind if I step in a sec?" he asked casually. Before I could answer, my wife called out, "Of course. Come in." So he did. He settled on the arm of the sofa, leaning close to her, as if it were his house. They talked about nothing, movies, neighborhood gossip, but the current underneath was unmistakable. At one point, she said something about exercise, and Mark chuckled. "Some workouts aren't on YouTube," he said, grinning. "Some you just have to discover." My wife rolled her eyes, but there was no real protest in it. "You're impossible," she said. "Maybe," he replied, "or maybe I just know what fits." That phrase again. Not direct, not incriminating, but suggestive enough to twist in my chest like a blade. When he finally left, I confronted her again. "You realize how that sounded?" She closed her book with a snap. "Stop. He jokes. That's who he is. If you keep twisting his words, you'll drive yourself crazy." "Maybe I already am," I said. For a moment, she softened. She reached out, touched my hand. "You're the only one I want. You know that." Her touch was warm, her eyes steady. And yet when I kissed her, her lips felt distracted, as though some part of her wasn't fully there with me. That night, lying awake beside her, I couldn't help but think, what if Mark wasn't wrong? What if there were poses, desires, things she'd never told me, things only someone else might uncover? The thought infuriated me, and it aroused me, and that was the most dangerous part of all. It was my wife's idea, though she pretended it wasn't. We'd open another bottle of wine on a Friday night, the kind of evening where the hours stretched loose and casual, and she pulled the black box from the shelf with a mischievous grin. "Should we?" she asked, tapping the lid. I raised a brow. "Really? After last time?" She laughed. "It's just a game. Besides, Mark seemed to enjoy it. Maybe we can rope him in again." I should have said no. I should have taken the box and put it away. But instead I found myself shrugging, pouring more wine into my glass. "If you want." Half an hour later, Mark was on our couch again, beer in hand, smile wide. "Couldn't resist, huh?" he said when he saw the cards spread across the table. "Told you it was more fun than it looks." The candles were lit again, the same warm flicker. My wife sat cross-legged across from him, hair loose, cheeks pink from wine. The atmosphere was thick with déjà vu, but this time it felt sharper, as though we'd all agreed silently that the game wasn't just for laughs anymore. The first few cards went the same way as before, giggles, eye rolls, exaggerated groans about impossible positions. But then she pulled one that showed a couple twisted into a pose. So ridiculous, it looked more like Cirque du Soleil than sex. "Oh, come on," she said, holding it up. Nobody could actually do this. Mark leaned forward, eyes on her, not the card. "I wouldn't say that." Her lips parted, a nervous laugh escaping. "What? You think you could?" He smirked. "It's not about me. Some things only look impossible until you try them, and some people surprise themselves." She shook her head, setting the card down, but her smile lingered longer than it should have. I swallowed hard, my glass trembling slightly in my hand. The game went on. She drew another card, this one less impossible, more intimate, a position that required closeness. She bit her lip, cheeks coloring. "No way. This one looks too much." Mark's grin widened. "Too much? I doubt that." My wife rolled her eyes, but I could see the flush spreading down her neck. She lifted her glass quickly, as if to hide behind it. I forced myself to speak, though my throat felt dry. She said she doesn't like it. Mark glanced at me, eyes glinting. "Sure, but sometimes people say that when they mean the opposite." The room went quiet. My wife laughed nervously, muttered, "You're ridiculous," and reached for another card. But the silence that followed was thick, charged. By the time the deck was half gone, the mood had shifted entirely. We weren't laughing as much anymore. The jokes felt thinner, the air heavier. I caught myself staring at her lips, at the way she chewed them when she was flustered, at the way her robe slipped a little when she leaned forward, and every time I saw Mark watching too, his gaze steady, unashamed. One card in particular nearly broke me. She drew it, glanced at it, and immediately shook her head. "No, absolutely not." Mark chuckled. "What is it?" She held it up just long enough for him to see. "Not me?" He grinned, slow and knowing. "I wouldn't say no to that." My chest tightened. "Show me," I demanded. She hesitated, then tossed the card face down onto the table. "It's stupid. Don't worry about it." But I did worry. I worried all night. When Mark finally left, he gave her a smile at the door that made my skin crawl. It wasn't polite, wasn't casual. It was a promise, silent but loud in its confidence. Upstairs, while she washed her face in the bathroom, I picked up the card she tossed down. I turned it over and my stomach clenched. The pose was explicit, demanding, the kind of thing that left no space for distance, an entanglement of limbs where both partners were pressed so close it was impossible to tell one from the other. I set it back down before she came in, when she climbed into bed beside me. I tried to kiss her, tried to remind myself that she was mine, that her warmth belonged to me. She kissed back, but there was a hesitation, a faint reluctance that burned hotter than rejection. Lying there in the dark, I stared at the ceiling. Mark's grin burned into my mind. He didn't have to say much. He never did. Just enough to plant the idea that he knew something I didn't, that maybe he saw a part of her I'd never touched. And the terrifying thing was, a part of me feared he was right. I told myself after that second game night that it would be the last, that I wouldn't let Mark back into the house, that I wouldn't give him the chance to sit across from my wife and drop those sly little lines. But life has a way of testing your resolve when it's weakest. 2 evenings later, I came home earlier than expected. The porch light wasn't on yet, the sun just beginning to sink, and as I walked up the path, I heard voices. "'Lo, Close." I slowed without meaning to, footsteps careful on the gravel, until the words grew clear. "Not every pose suits everyone," Mark was saying, his voice pitched low and smooth. "But some people just know what feels right." A pause, then my wife's laugh, soft, nervous, but real. "You sound like an expert." "Not an expert," he replied. "Just someone who pays attention." Her voice dropped lower, almost conspiratorial. "And you think you know what would suit me?" "Let's just say," he said after a beat, "I wouldn't say no to finding out." The silence that followed was thick, buzzing with unspoken things. My chest clenched, fury and arousal warring inside me. I wanted to storm onto the porch, drag him away, demand answers. Instead, I forced myself to keep walking, heavy-footed this time, letting the sound of my arrival scatter whatever tension had settled there. When I stepped onto the porch, they both looked up too quickly. My wife's cheeks were flushed, Mark's grin firmly in place. "Hey," she said brightly, too brightly. "We were just talking about the garden." "Garden," I repeated flatly. Mark raised his beer in a mock toast. "Your wife was giving me tips. You've got quite the green thumb here." I stared at him, at the casual ease of his posture, the way he leaned just a little too close to her. He wasn't even pretending anymore. He wanted me to see. Inside, I held my tongue until we were alone. My wife was rinsing dishes in the sink when I finally asked, "What exactly were you talking about out there?" She froze for a heartbeat before answering. "Nothing. Just joking around." Sounded like more than that. I pressed. She turned, water dripping from her hands, eyes sharp. "You were eavesdropping?" "I heard enough." Her jaw tightened. Mark teases. He always has. You can't twist every word into something else. "Do you like it?" I asked quietly. "Do you like the way he talks to you?" Her lips parted, then pressed shut. She looked away. "You're being ridiculous." But she never actually said no. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. My wife's back was to me, her breathing slow and even. My thoughts churned, replaying the words I'd heard, the softness in her voice when she asked him if he thought he knew what would suit her. That wasn't how you shut down a man pushing boundaries. That was curiosity. That was invitation. I rolled onto my back, staring at the ceiling. My body betrayed me again. Anger twisted into a pulse of arousal. I imagined her with him. Not because I wanted to, but because the image clung like tar. His hands on her hips, his mouth against her throat, her gasp when he showed her something new. I hated it, and yet some dark part of me wanted to see how far she let him go. I reached for her, sliding my hand across her waist. She stirred but didn't turn toward me. Her skin was warm, soft under my palm. For a moment, I thought she might welcome me. But then she shifted just slightly, pulling the blanket higher, muttering in her sleep. Rejection, even accidental, burned hotter than fire. The following day, I resolved to confront Mark. But when I saw him in his driveway, whistling as he loaded tools into his truck, he looked so casual, so unaffected, that the words caught in my throat. What would I even accuse him of? Saying things? Smiling too much? He saw me and waved. "Morning. Great weather." "Huh." I forced a smile, but inside I seethed. He wasn't going to give me anything obvious. He was too smart for that. He'd keep it light, keep it playful, all while planting suggestions that rooted deeper and deeper into my wife's mind. And mine, because it wasn't just about her anymore. It was about me, what I was failing to give her, what he implied he could. That night, over dinner, I tried again. If he makes another comment like that, I told her, "I want you to shut it down." Firmly. No more laughing it off. She sighed, pushing pasta around her plate. "You don't get it, do you? If I make a big deal out of it, it becomes a big deal. If I laugh, it goes away." "Does it?" I asked. She looked at me, something unreadable in her eyes. "It's only a big deal because you keep making it one." But deep down, I knew she was wrong. It wasn't going away. It was growing. And I had no idea how much longer before it broke through the surface and consumed everything. By the time the weekend rolled around, my patience had thinned to threads. I felt like a man holding a rope that kept slipping through his hands, inch by inch, and no matter how tight I gripped, it was getting away from me. I told myself I'd confront her properly this time. No half accusations, no vague questions. I needed clarity or I'd lose my mind. It started on Saturday morning, over coffee at the kitchen table. She sat in her robe, scrolling her phone, hair pulled back in a loose knot. She looked soft, casual, untouched by the tension burning inside me. I put my mug down harder than I meant to. "You need to tell me something." Her eyes flicked up. "What?" "Why you let him talk to you like that?" Her lips parted, surprise giving way to irritation. "Not this again." "Yes, this again," I said. "You know what I heard the other night. You didn't stop him. You asked him if he thought he knew what suited you. What the hell does that mean?" Her face flushed, but her tone sharpened. "It means I was being polite. You twist everything into something dirty." "Dirty?" I leaned forward. "He is being dirty. And you laugh. You encourage it." "I don't encourage anything," she snapped. I laugh because if I don't, it turns into exactly this. You raging, me defending myself. Maybe you're the problem, not him. The words hit like a slap. For a moment I just stared, unable to breathe. That afternoon, as if summoned by my anger, Mark showed up. He knocked, but when I opened the door, he stepped inside without waiting for an invitation. Casual, comfortable, too comfortable. "Hey," he said, holding a six-pack. "Figure we could watch the game later." Behind me, my wife appeared, smiling faintly. Perfect timing. I was just making snacks. I felt something snap. "Can I talk to you for a second?" I asked him, voice low, sharp. He raised a brow but followed me into the hallway. "What's up?" I got close enough that my voice wouldn't carry. "Stop. Whatever game you're playing, stop. No more comments. No more little hints. No more pretending you know her better than I do." For a moment, he looked surprised. Then he smiled. Not sheepishly, not apologetically, just smiled. I wouldn't say I'm pretending. The floor tilted under me. "What's that supposed to mean?" "Nothing," he said lightly, though his grin didn't fade. "Relax. You're too wound up. Cut the crap, Mark. I mean it." He clapped a hand on my shoulder, as though we were friends again. "Sure, whatever you say." But the grin told me otherwise. Back in the living room, I found my wife setting out bowls of chips, as if she hadn't heard the tension thick enough to choke on. She looked at me briefly, searching my face, then turned away. Mark dropped onto the couch, cracking a beer, legs spread wide like he owned the place. My wife sat next to him, not too close, but not far enough either. Through the game, I couldn't focus on the screen. I kept watching the way she laughed at his jokes, the way he leaned toward her just enough to blur the line between casual and intimate. At one point, she brushed her hair back, and his eyes followed the motion down to her neckline before flicking away. My chest burned. During commercial break, he leaned back, stretched, and said with a grin, "You know, it's funny what people hide about themselves. Sometimes it takes an outsider to see it." My wife froze for a second, then laughed too quickly. "You're impossible." But I saw the flicker in her eyes. Not fear, not anger. Something else. Something like curiosity. That night, after Mark finally left, I cornered her again. "You see what he's doing, don't you?" She sighed, rubbing her temples. "He flirts. Big deal. That doesn't mean anything." "It means he thinks he can get away with it," I said. "And you're letting him." Her eyes narrowed. "So what do you want to do? Be rude? Slam the door in his face? Make this neighborhood miserable?" "I want you to tell him no. Firmly. Make it clear." She shook her head. "If I do that, you'll just think it's because there's something to hide." Her logic twisted me into knots. She was right. Part of me would think that. But the alternative, her laughing off his insinuations, was killing me. When she climbed into bed, I stayed downstairs, staring at the empty bottles on the counter. I kept hearing Mark's voice. I wouldn't say I'm pretending. What wasn't he pretending about? That he knew her? That he'd touched her? That he'd already guessed her secrets better than I had in years? By the time dawn broke, I'd made a decision. If he was so sure of himself, I'd push him. I'd call his bluff. One way or another, I'd find out just how far he was willing to go, and how far my wife would let him. I don't remember exactly how it happened. Only that one moment the box was on the shelf, and the next it was back on the table, glossy and innocent like a dare. My wife set it down with a casual shrug, as though it were nothing, but the flicker in her eyes betrayed her. Mark was there again, of course. He always seemed to be around now, dropping by with beers, helping with small chores, acting like he belonged. That night, he settled into his usual spot on the couch, grinning when he saw the cards. "Back at it?" he said, cracking the can open. "You two must be getting hooked." "We were just bored," my wife said quickly. "It's silly fun." I wanted to object, to say no, to put the damn box back on the shelf where it belonged. But something in me, anger, curiosity, maybe both, kept me seated. If this game was how he kept testing the waters, then fine. I'd watch. I'd see how far he'd push and how far she'd let him. The first few cards were tame enough. My wife laughed, Mark teased. I drank. But then she pulled one and immediately shook her head, cheeks pink. "Oh, God. No, this one looks painful." Mark leaned forward, eyes flicking from the card to her. "Painful? I wouldn't say that." She rolled her eyes, but her lips curved faintly. "You can't be serious." "I'm serious about this," he said smoothly. "Some poses only make sense when you try them. You'd be surprised what feels right once you stop thinking about it." The silence that followed was sharp. My wife laughed nervously, setting the card down. "You're ridiculous." But she didn't sound entirely convinced. Later, another card made her pause longer than usual. She studied it, biting her lip before finally muttering, "Too much. Definitely not for me." Mark's grin widened. "That's what you say now." Her gaze flicked to him, quick and uncertain. "Now." "Sure," he said, voice low but steady. "Some things you can't judge from a picture. Some things you only know once you feel them." Her cheeks flushed deeper, and she raised her glass to hide behind it. I forced myself to speak. "She said she doesn't like it." Mark glanced at me, calm as ever, and I said I wouldn't say that. Difference of perspective. The air was heavy, thick with suggestion. I could feel my pulse in my throat. He wasn't even pretending anymore. He was talking in code, lines so close to confessions I almost wanted to hit him. The turning point came when she drew a card with a pose that looked less acrobatic and more intimate, the kind of thing that required faces inches apart, bodies pressed close. She stared at it, hesitated, then gave a short, nervous laugh. "Not happening." Mark tilted his head. "Why not?" "Because it looks ridiculous," she said. "Or maybe it looks like something you don't want to admit you'd enjoy." Her eyes snapped at his wide. For a moment, the room went silent. She laughed again, too quickly, shaking her head. "You're insane." But she didn't throw the card away. She slid it slowly onto the pile, her fingers lingering on it longer than necessary. I saw it. Mark saw it. And in that moment, I realized the line between joking and flirting had vanished completely. By the time the game wound down, my chest felt like it was on fire. My wife was flushed, giggling more than she should, sipping wine too quickly. Mark's grin never wavered, and each time his eyes caught mine, it was like he was daring me to do something. At the door as he left, he turned back to her and said, "Thanks for the game. You make it more fun than most." Her laugh was soft, almost shy. "Good night, Mark." When the door clicked shut, I rounded on her. "Do you hear yourself? Do you hear him? He's not hiding it anymore." She sighed, running her hands through her hair. "He flirts. Big deal." "It is a big deal," I snapped. "He's acting like he knows you better than I do. And the way you laugh." "What am I supposed to do?" She cut me off. "Be rude? Tell him to get out?" You'd think that meant something, too. I stared at her, furious, lost. "Maybe it does." Her eyes softened, but not with guilt, with something more dangerous. Curiosity. "You're jealous," she said quietly. "And maybe that's the real problem. You can't stand that someone else sees me, notices me when you stop paying attention." Her words sliced deep, and for the first time, I wondered if she was right. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her blush, saw his grin, heard his voice saying, "Some things you only know once you feel them." I hated him. I hated her laughter. And I hated myself most of all for wanting to know if he was right. The fuse had been burning for weeks, and that night it finally reached the powder. I'd told myself 100 times I would keep calm, play it smart, let Mark slip and reveal himself. But watching him inch closer and closer to my wife, while she pretended not to notice, was unbearable. Something inside me snapped. It started innocently enough. Pizza boxes, beer, a casual movie night. The three of us lounged in the living room, the lights low, the screen flickering. My wife curled up in the corner of the couch, legs tucked under her, a blanket draped loosely around her shoulders. Mark sat on the other end, but as the night wore on, I noticed the space between them shrinking. First his arm rested along the back of the couch, then his knee angled just slightly toward her. Subtle moves, but deliberate. At one point she laughed at something on the screen, head tilting toward him, hair brushing against his shoulder. My stomach clenched. He didn't move away. He let it linger. I set my beer down hard enough to rattle the bottles. "Enough." Both their heads turned toward me, surprise flashing across their faces. "Enough what?" my wife asked carefully. "Enough of this," I said, standing. My voice shook, but not from uncertainty, from rage. The little comments, the looks, the games. I'm done pretending it's harmless. Mark raised his brows, calm as ever. "You're overreacting, man." "Overreacting." I stepped closer. "You've been sitting in my house for weeks, dropping hints like you know her better than I do, like you figured her out." "I'm not blind, Mark." His grin returned, slow and infuriating. "I never said I knew her better. I just noticed things." "Bullshit." My wife rose then, hands up as though to stop us. "Both of you, stop. This is insane." But I couldn't stop. I looked at her, heart pounding. "And you laugh. You let him say these things. Do you even realize what it looks like?" Her face flushed, her eyes hard. What do you want me to do? Yell at him? Slam the door in his face? That would make everything worse. No, I snapped. What makes it worse is you enjoying it. The room went silent. Her lips parted, but no denial came. Only that silence, heavier than any words. Mark chuckled, breaking it. Look, you're jealous. I get it, but don't take it out on her. She's not doing anything wrong. Shut up, I growled. He tilted his head. Or maybe you're scared because she's curious. Maybe she wonders if there's more to her than what you've given her. My fist clenched. Say one more word. Stop. My wife cried, stepping between us. She pressed a hand to my chest, the other to his arm. This has gone too far. But her touch, her tone, it wasn't the firm rejection I needed to hear. It was a plea for peace, not loyalty. The rest of the night unraveled in fragments. Mark eventually left, still smiling, still too calm. At the door, he glanced back and said softly to my wife, "You know where to find me if you ever want to talk." She didn't answer. She just closed the door. Upstairs, the fight continued. "You think I want this?" she demanded, pacing the bedroom. "You think I like being caught in the middle of your paranoia? Then prove it," I said. "Tell him to stop. Tell him it's over." She froze, then shook her head. "If I do that, you'll think it's because there was something to hide. There's no winning with you. Then why does it feel like he's winning?" I shot back. Her eyes glistened, whether from anger or something else. I couldn't tell, because you've already decided he is. She climbed into bed, pulling the blanket around her. I stood in the dark for a long time, staring at the shape of her body beneath the sheets, my mind spinning. It wasn't just Mark I was fighting anymore. It was a possibility that she wanted him to win. I lay awake, heart hammering, her words replaying in my head. Maybe she wonders if there's more to her than what you've given her. The thought gnawed at me, sharp and poisonous. And the worst part? A part of me feared it was true. The days after the confrontation felt like walking across broken glass. Every step I took in our house carried the risk of reopening the wounds from that night. My wife barely spoke to me, except for clipped exchanges about groceries or bills. Mark hadn't shown his face since, but the ghost of his grin haunted every room. I woke each morning to silence. She no longer kissed me on the cheek before heading to work. She barely even looked at me. Her absence during the day gave me no relief either. If anything, my mind filled the empty space with images I couldn't control. I imagined her running into him. Imagine her laughing at his jokes. Imagine her leaning close in that way she had. Each scenario churned inside me until the line between suspicion and reality blurred. One evening, I found her at the kitchen counter, scrolling her phone with a faint smile. She didn't see me at first. My chest tightened. When she finally noticed, she locked the screen instantly, as though I caught her with something forbidden. "Who was that?" I asked. "No one," she said, voice too quick, too flat. "Don't lie." She set the phone down hard. It was a co-worker. "That's all." Was it him? Her eyes narrowed. "Do you hear yourself? You sound crazy." Maybe I did, but that didn't stop the question from burning in my throat. Nights in bed became a torment. We still slept side by side, but her back was always turned, her body angled away. When I reached out, she stiffened. When I pulled away, she sighed as if relieved. The physical distance grew heavier than the silence. One night, unable to take it, I whispered, "Do you still want me?" She didn't answer. That silence was worse than any confession. The tension bled into everything. At work, I snapped at colleagues. Driving, I gripped the wheel so hard my knuckles ached. Even small things, her perfume on the bathroom counter, her laughter drifting down the hall during a phone call, became sharp knives twisting in my chest. The worst came on a Friday evening. She'd said she was going out with friends after work. I tried to believe her, but the hours dragged on and doubt consumed me. 10 p.m. came. 11. Midnight. The bed stayed empty. When the front door finally creaked open at nearly 2, I sat up instantly. "Where were you?" My voice cracked in the darkness. She jumped at the sound, then closed the door quietly behind her. "I told you. Out with friends." "Which ones?" She paused only a second, but long enough. "Samantha and Claire." I stood at the top of the stairs, watching her slip off her heels. "Show me your phone." Her head snapped up. "Excuse me?" "Show me. If it's just them, prove it." Her jaw tightened. "No." "Why not?" "Because I don't have to." Her defiance sliced through me. For weeks I'd been waiting, hoping for her to reassure me, to prove my fears unfounded. But instead, she chose defiance. And that choice told me more than any phone screen ever could. The next morning, I confronted her again. If there's nothing going on, cut him out, block his number, tell him to leave us alone. Her eyes softened for just a moment, and I thought maybe she'd agree, but then she shook her head. I won't let you dictate who I can and can't talk to. That's control, not love. It's not control if he's trying to wedge himself into our marriage. She folded her arms. Maybe the problem isn't him. Maybe it's the fact that you don't trust me. That hit like a blade to the ribs. She was right in a way. I didn't trust her. But wasn't that because she'd given me reason not to? By Sunday, the silence was unbearable. I drove aimlessly for hours, circling neighborhoods, staring at glowing windows, wondering how many other men sat in cars like mine, drowning in suspicion. When I finally came home, the house was dark. She was asleep, curled on her side, looking small, almost innocent. I lay beside her, watching the slow rise and fall of her breath. Part of me wanted to shake her awake, demand answers. Another part wanted to pull her close and pretend none of this had happened. Instead, I lay frozen, torn between rage and longing. In that fragile moment, I realized something terrifying. The marriage wasn't breaking apart because of what had or hadn't happened between her and Mark. It was breaking apart because the distance between us had become a chasm, and neither of us was reaching across. But in the shadows of that realization came another thought, darker still. If she wouldn't protect what we had, if she wouldn't choose me over him, then maybe it was time I stopped protecting her from the consequences. Revenge wasn't a plan yet, just a whisper in the back of my mind. But it was growing louder. The decision came quietly, without ceremony. No thunderclap of revelation, no dramatic vow. Just me, lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling while her breathing softened into sleep beside me. Somewhere between midnight and dawn, the thought hardened. If she wouldn't draw the line, then I would. And it wouldn't be with begging or ultimatums. It would be with precision, with revenge. The next morning, I studied her across the breakfast table. She scrolled through her phone, sipping coffee, barely glancing at me. Every flick of her thumb across the screen felt like proof that my suspicions weren't paranoia. Maybe she was texting Mark. Maybe she was arranging the next secret smile, the next too long pause. The longer I watched, the clearer it became. Waiting for her to confess or change was a fool's game. That's when I remembered the camera in the garage. I'd installed it months ago after a string of neighborhood break-ins. A tiny black lens hidden in the corner, feeding straight to a cloud account I hadn't checked in weeks. The thought planted a seed. What if I expanded that surveillance? Not to protect our car or tools, but to protect myself from lies. The plan grew in fragments over the week. I started small. A new account on my laptop, one she'd never stumbled across. Then a few purchases, extra cameras, discreet motion activated. I told her they were for security upgrades. She didn't ask questions. That indifference almost stung more than suspicion. At night, when she fell asleep, I paced through the house, testing angles. The living room, the hallway, even the kitchen, where her laughter during innocent phone calls had cut me deepest. By the time the weekend came, our home was laced with invisible eyes. I wasn't proud, but pride had left me long ago. The first recordings were boring, hours of nothing but quiet dinners and silence. But then came Tuesday night. She said she was working late. I poured myself a drink, logged into the feed, and waited. At 9:47, the front door opened. My pulse thudded. She stepped inside, hair slightly tousled, a faint smile on her lips. She paused in the hallway mirror, adjusting her blouse, smoothing it in a way that spoke of being touched. My jaw clenched. She didn't see the camera. She didn't know I was watching. I saved the file. But collecting proof wasn't enough. Proof meant nothing if she could twist it, excuse it, cry her way out of it. No, I needed a stage. A moment where she and Mark would hang themselves with their own words, their own actions. That Friday, I called him. My voice stayed steady, though my grip on the phone was tight enough to leave marks. Hey, Mark, you free this weekend? Thought, maybe we could get together again. Cards, drinks, like old times. There was a pause, just long enough to confirm what I already knew. He hadn't expected me to extend any invitation. Then his tone smoothed. Sure, sounds fun. When I hung up, I almost laughed. Fun. Yes, it would be. Saturday night arrived crisp and cool. I set the table with the same deck of risque cards we'd used before. The wine was ready, the glasses gleaming. She raised an eyebrow when I told her Mark was coming. You invited him? Why not? I said evenly. We had a good time last round, and we... She studied me too long, suspicion flickering. But she didn't argue. That silence told me everything. When the doorbell rang, I greeted him with a smile I didn't feel. His grin was practice, his handshake firm. To anyone else, we looked like friends catching up. But beneath the surface, the air was charged, thick with unspoken knowledge. The game began. Cards shuffled, laughter forced. At first, it almost felt normal until she drew a card, glanced at it, and gave that same nervous laugh. I don't like this pose, she murmured. And right on cue, Mark leaned back, eyes glinting. I wouldn't say so. The same words, the same grin. But this time, I didn't laugh. This time, I watched. I watched the way her lips parted, the faint blush that touched her neck, the flicker of complicity in her eyes. The camera I'd hidden on the shelf above the television caught it all. Every twitch of his mouth, every shift in her gaze. As the night wore on, the tension sharpened. They thought they were being discreet. Glances, smiles, touches that lingered too long. But I saw everything. And my plan was no longer just to catch them. It was to let them bury themselves. Near midnight, I feigned drunkenness. I slurred, stumbled, excused myself to the bathroom. In truth, I slipped into my office, checked the feed, and confirmed it was recording perfectly. Then I waited. From down the hall came muffled laughter, lower now, intimate. A pause, the sound of a chair scraping back. My heart hammered as I imagined what might come next. Part of me wanted to storm in, fists flying. But the colder part, the part that had been growing for weeks, reminded me, patience, let them reveal themselves. And when they did, I'd be ready. That night, as I lay in bed pretending to sleep, I knew the pieces were aligned. Soon, the truth would no longer be hidden in shadows or half-truths. It would be exposed, undeniable, inescapable. And when it came to light, I wouldn't be the one left broken. They would. The house felt too quiet the next morning, like the walls themselves were waiting. She moved to the kitchen as if nothing had happened, humming faintly while pouring coffee. Mark's laughter from last night still echoed in my head, that sly grin flashing every time I closed my eyes. The recording sat waiting on my hard drive, heavy as a weapon. I didn't touch my coffee. I didn't trust myself not to choke on it. I let her talk about errands, groceries, the mundane rhythm of our shared life, while inside me something sharp turned over and over. I was done being silent, done collecting shadows. It was time to pull the curtain back. By evening, I had everything ready. The dining room was set again, wine glasses, deck of cards in the center, the faint air of casual hospitality. When she asked what the occasion was, I lied smoothly. Mark's coming again. I said. Her head snapped up. Tonight? Didn't we just... Yeah, thought we'd run it back. He seemed to enjoy himself. She hesitated, then nodded, but her unease was obvious. Good. She could feel it too, even if she didn't yet understand. When the knock came, I greeted him with warmth I didn't feel. His handshake was confident, his eyes glancing past me almost immediately toward her. And there it was, the tiny spark, the unspoken current that had been burning holes in my gut for weeks. We sat, cards shuffled, wine poured. At first, the conversation stumbled, polite but strained. Then the laughter started again, too loud, too quick, like all three of us were afraid of silence. The game flowed, cards flashing with bold illustrations. Everyone at test neither of them realized they were taking. She drew another card, glanced at it, and giggled nervously, just as she had before. I don't like this pose, she murmured, cheeks warming. Mark grinned. I wouldn't say so. The air froze. His eyes flicked toward her, daring, loaded with more meaning than the words alone should carry. She looked back, lips caught between a smile and denial. It lasted only a heartbeat, but I had it. They had given me everything. I raised my glass, the faintest smile on my lips. You know, I said casually, that's interesting, because I wouldn't say so either. They both blinked at me, confused. I leaned back in my chair and pressed a button on the small remote hidden in my pocket. The television on the far wall flickered to life. And there, larger than life, was last night's recording. Her walking in late, adjusting her blouse, his hand brushing hers over the cards. Their stolen glances, their lingering laughter. Every second was there, silent but damning. Her face drained of color. Mark stiffened, his grin collapsing. What is this?" she whispered. I didn't answer. The screen did. The images rolled, every detail playing out with undeniable clarity. Their secrets, their betrayals. Exposed not in accusation, but in cold, irrefutable evidence. Silence thickened. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "It's not what it looks like." I cut her off with a laugh, low and bitter. "Don't insult me. You think I can't see it? The way you light up when he's in the room? The way you forget I even exist?" Mark finally spoke, voice tight. "Man, this is twisted. Spy on your own wife? That's sick." I turned to him, letting the venom show. "Sick? You sit at my table, drink my wine, flirt with my wife, and you call me sick? No, Mark. I just learned to play the game the way you do. Only difference is I'm better at it." He shifted, trying to recover his grin, but it faltered. She looked between us, panic rising. I leaned forward, voice steady. "I wanted to see what you'd do if I left the room, and you didn't disappoint. Every look, every laugh, it's all here, and now you can't take it back." She started crying then, the kind of tears meant to soften, to sway. But I felt nothing. Not anger, not sorrow, just a strange calm. For weeks I'd been drowning in suspicion, confusion, pain. But now, watching them both crumble under the weight of their own exposure, I felt free. I stood, towering over the table. "You two deserve each other, and you'll have each other, but you won't have me." Her eyes widened, terror flashing through them. "Wait, don't. Please, we can fix this." I shook my head. "No, you've already chosen." Mark tried to speak, but I cut him off with a single gesture toward the screen. His face frozen mid-grin told the whole story. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and gestured. "Get out, both of you. Tonight." They hesitated, stunned. She tried again, voice breaking. "Please, don't end it like this." "It ended the moment you let him touch you," I said. The rest was just waiting for me to catch up. For a long, stretched moment, nobody moved. Then she rose slowly, gathering her things with trembling hands. Mark followed, silent for once. Together, they walked past me, out into the night. I closed the door behind them, locked it, and exhaled. The house was silent again. But this time, it wasn't oppressive. It was cleansing. Later, I poured myself a drink and sat at the table alone. The cards still lay scattered, ridiculous illustrations staring up at me. I gathered them, shuffled once, and set them aside. The game was over. I wasn't broken. I wasn't defeated. I was done being the fool. And as the night stretched on, I realized something. Betrayal had burned me down to ash. But ash wasn't the end. It was a beginning. And tomorrow I would rise.